There are only two things that matter with a VPN. Does the VPN use open source software that users can verify is not logging their internet activity? Have police gotten a court order to get user activity logs from that VPN, only to find out that the logs never existed because of the company's transparent no-log policy? The only VPN who can answer yes to both of those questions is private internet access. The only VPN who can prove that your data stays private. They're giving you 83% off, which is just $203 a month, plus 4 extra months for free at piavpn.com/DavidP. We start today with what we are calling the MAGA kiss of death. Romanian Trump has gotten absolutely crushed. Let me explain what's going on. It just keeps happening. It's another one of these far-right Trump-style candidates who is biting the dust, and this time it's in Romania. We saw it in Canada. We saw it in Australia. And this time what we have is that George Simeon, Romania's sort of answer to Trump, with the same nationalism and the same conspiracies, the same make insert country great again nonsense, he just got wrecked in the presidential election. Now, interestingly, Simeon actually won the first round, but when it came time for the real thing, voters picked the centrist, Nicosor Dan, instead. And the sound you hear is a sound of relief, a sigh of relief coming from the European Union, because Simeon ran on this anti-immigrant, anti-vaccine, anti-European Union rhetoric. And increasingly, to fewer and fewer people's surprise, he spent months whining about voter fraud and alleged Russian interference. But here's the twist. It was real. The story is, it's almost beyond parody. The first round of Romania's election was thrown out over legitimate evidence of Russian meddling. And guess who benefited from that? Simeon, which is, of course, classic, just par for the course at this point in time. So after a redo, voters dumped him for the pro-democracy, pro-EU moderate, just sort of an unremarkable moderate. And just like that, another one of these Trump clones went down. Now, I think that this is a perfect time to zoom out and now realize that this is not specifically about Romania, although good for Romania for stemming this a potentially problematic fiasco. Think back to Canada and think back to Pierre Poilievre, the Canadian conservative leader who tried to out-Trump Trump, realized it was a bad idea, panicked, and said, I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm just doing my own thing. Not only did he end up losing his chance to become the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, of course, with the Liberal Party, ultimately winning, but Poilievre also lost his seat in Parliament straight up. Not just he's not going to be prime minister, he's not going to be in Parliament at all. He's out, he's done, he's toast. And then meanwhile, former central banker Mark Carney is now leading the Liberal Party. Not a progressive hero, but, you're not going to confuse Mark Carney with a Fox News host made Secretary of Defense. Let's put it that way. We then go to Australia. In Australia, Peter Dutton, their kind of like right-wing Trump-style attack dog and Trump wannabe, he got booted as well. Lost his seat, handed Labor a second term, and his whole campaign was, the typical fear-mongering, culture war bait, parroting American right-wing talking points, and it failed. So now with Canada, Australia, and Romania as examples, we can say, what is going on here? What is going on in this seeming reversal of the global MAGA movement that during Trump's first term, quite frankly, was terrifyingly successful and increasingly powerful? And the idea here is there was a period during which if you screamed loud enough and said fake news enough, you can kind of ride this wave to power. It seems to be running out of gas. This is not a trend that started in 2025. We've seen these waves before. Trump won in 2016, and it kind of rippled globally. Bolsonaro in Brazil, Modi doubling down in India, Orban tightening his grip in Hungary. And it was a sort of golden age of right-wing populist nationalism, where every country suddenly had its own version of fake news and of drain the swamp and of build the wall. But it seems to be wrapping because it's a stale playbook. People have seen what happens when these guys get in power. Although the voters in the US in total were not smart enough to go a different direction in November of 2024. It seems as though in many other countries, they have figured out this whole Trumpian experiment and Trump light around the world is a very, very bad idea. You've got corruption, you've got incompetence, and basic institutions are getting attacked. And we can have fun with the talking points, build the wall and all that stuff until the economy tanks, until your healthcare system starts to collapse, until infrastructure crumbles. And as it turns out, most voters don't want a full-time culture war absent actual tangible economic achievement. So people want affordable groceries and they want hospitals that work, schools you can count on, leaders who can form complete sentences here and there. So populism is not dead. As I've said before, populism is an ideology. It's a rhetoric more than anything else. It's not a set of policy ideas, and it still has cachet around the world. But the Trump brand of populist rhetoric, the paranoia, the anti-vax conspiracies, love letters to Kim Jong-un or Putin authoritarians, I'm hopeful that more and more global voters are getting over it. And so the kiss of death of Trump, it's not just metaphorical anymore. It's an electoral kiss of death. I guess that still is sort of a metaphor. It's showing up on ballots tangibly is the point that I'm trying to make. So when we hear, Trumpism is the future, the model is here, but it's a global model. Show them the map, right? Romania, Australia, Canada, these guys are being sent packing, and that's a great thing. Maybe, hopefully, what we are seeing is the beginning of a correction, a slow rejection of the idea that shouting globalist and woke is a substitute for actual policy. If the trend holds, I hope it does, it could reshape global politics in a way we really haven't seen, arguably since the post-World War II order was built, in its total effect. We're going to follow it. 3 countries on the list. Let's see if we can soon add a 4th that says bye-bye to MAGA Trumpism. All right, it is time to talk about the Trump tax plan. I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to skip to the end. And there is not a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. There's a pot of coal. The rich get richer, while taxes may even go up for middle average income Americans. Let's talk about what is in this bill. And it's critical to understand that some of this is still under negotiations. There are even some Republicans who don't like elements of this. There are Republicans not pleased with what they want to do with the SALT cap. There are Republicans not pleased with what they want to do with Q-bid. Okay, so we're going to talk about it. But here's what's in the bill as we understand it right now. First of all, the 2017 tax cuts for individuals are going to be extended. Now, this has been misinterpreted by some as the richest will get a cut. That's not strictly speaking true. Now, the richest may end up getting more cuts from some of the other things in the bill. But remember that the 2017 Trump tax bill lowered the top federal tax rate from 39.6 to 37. That expires at the end of this year. So if not renewed, the top earners would go from 37 to 39.6. What this bill would do is keep the 37% tax rate. So tax rates wouldn't go down, but they wouldn't go up as scheduled to do, and that top tax rate would remain 37%. You may recall that there was a little bit of flirtation, very, very flirty, with maybe we'll raise taxes on millionaires. Now, when they were talking about that, as is often the case, when they said raise taxes on millionaires, we didn't know if they meant people who have $1 million in income a year or $1 million net worth, including the equity in their primary home, or $1 million net worth, excluding the equity in their primary home. We don't know, but it doesn't matter because it's not in the bill. They flirted with it. They played coy. They maybe swiped left or right, which is it once, but they're not going to do it. No tax on tips and no tax on overtime. is in the bill. It excludes what they define as highly compensated employees. I don't know exactly which those are. And it also includes no taxes on tips for gig workers. So if you get tipped driving Uber or Lyft, you wouldn't pay taxes on those tips. Some of the stuff in the tax bill expires in 2029 when Trump leaves office, shortly after Trump leaves office. Increasing the child tax credit from $2,000 to $2,500 will expire in 2029. $1,000 bonus to the standard deduction for single filers. So if you're single, you can take a $16,000 standard deduction instead of $15,000. That expires in 2029. The debt ceiling would be raised by $4 trillion as part of this bill. A new savings plan for kids will be created. Now listen to this sycophancy. It's called the Money Accounts for Growth and Advancement. Money Accounts for Growth and Advancement. The acronym is MAGA. No accident there. And they're already calling them MAGA savings accounts. It'll be potentially $1,000 contribution from the government and would then allow you to contribute up to $5,000 annually in after-tax dollars. This is not that awesome because after-tax dollars means you're not getting a tax deduction for the contributions, and then there's no ability to withdraw the money tax-free. So it's like it's not really that great, but it's in the bill. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff for businesses. New deductions for depreciation of property, interest expenses, R&D costs. It would make permanent the 199A deduction. This is what we call the qualified business income deduction, or I call it QBID, and it would give it a new rate of 23%. I've spoken about how huge of a tax cut this is for businesses like mine. They want to keep it and they want to make it bigger. Do I like it personally? Sure. I love keeping more of the money that my business takes in. Does it make sense at a macroeconomic level? Not really. Not really. There's also a rollback of a whole bunch of clean energy credits that were implemented under Biden, like for solar panels, electric vehicles. They want to get rid of that stuff. They flirted with closing the carried interest loophole. They're not going to do it. No surprise. They flirted with changing the corporate tax rate. Trump said he wanted it lower. No change in the bill. And then, like, the big thing, the elephant in the room, the orange entity in the corner of the room is what happens with SALT deduction. You may recall that if this is too wonky, by the way, please let me know. You may recall that in 2017, this Trump's tax bill capped state and local tax deductions at $10,000. This hit people disproportionately who live in some of the more prosperous blue states, which overall have higher state taxes. What it means to cap SALT at 10K means that imagine that your property has a $7,000 a year property tax and that you pay another $6,000 in state income tax. We're up to $13,000, right? 7K for your property, 6K in state income taxes. That's $13K. If you cap SALT at 10K, you only get to deduct from your federal taxes 10 of the $13,000 you have in that type of tax. So people in blue states, California, New York, Massachusetts, who say, hey, I pay $13,000 a year in state and local taxes. I pay $16,000, I pay $25,000 a year. I only get to deduct 10K. You're disproportionately punishing blue states. And of course they were. They don't know what they're going to do with it yet in this new tax bill. There's the idea of raising the SALT cap to 30K. There's one proposal which would raise the SALT cap to $62,000. If that is done, we could be talking about $1 trillion in expense for the government over the next decade. So this is the totality of the bill. There's work requirements. There's the Medicaid rollbacks we've talked about. That's all in there. The theme is big picture, make it easier for the rich to get richer. And don't make it particularly easier for lower and middle class Americans to get a leg up and have the potential to improve their economic circumstances in society. I don't think anybody is going to be surprised by the fact that that's what this does. Now the question is, what can they get past because even some Republicans are not happy with some of these provisions. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you like these segments explaining what's in a bill, and make sure you're getting my newsletter, which you can get by signing up for on my website, or just shoot me an email, info@davidpakman.com. Say, David, please put me on that newsletter.
So many different VPNs reach out to me wanting to advertise on the show, and I always turn them down because most of them do not pass the sniff test. Most VPNs are all owned by the same big mysterious company. They log your internet activity so they can sell it or give it to law enforcement. And these VPNs are just out to make a buck without really protecting your privacy. The only VPN I trust enough to have as a sponsor is Private Internet Access. Our sponsor, Private Internet Access, is the only VPN who has proven multiple times in legal proceedings they don't keep logs of your activity. The judge ordered that PIA show user activity history. Each time they demonstrated they don't have the records. That no log policy is also independently audited by Deloitte. And PIA is also open source. So you can also see in the code that none of your activity is being logged. And you can protect unlimited devices with just a single account. Private Internet Access is giving my audience 83% off, which is just $203 a month, plus 4 extra months for free. Go to piavpn.com/DavidP. The link is down below. As an independent progressive media program, we depend on your support to do what we do. Get the full David Pakman Show experience, which includes audio and video versions of the show, lacking commercials, made available hours before we publish the show publicly, and also an extra show every day called The Bonus Show. Read about it and sign up in about a minute. You know, people say, David, how difficult is it to sign up? Does it require clicking? Do I need to fax anybody? No. With very basic tech skills, you can sign up at joinpakman.com. I estimate in 60 to 90 seconds, assuming you have ready access to a credit or debit card. All right, check that out. We saw yesterday a complete and total cognitive collapse from the current president, Donald Trump, stating with confidence that former President Joe Biden has stage 9 cancer, something that does not exist, and Trump devolving as he was given increasing amounts of rope with which to hang himself, devolving into conspiracy theories, the suggestions that there has been some kind of cover-up here. This is the President of the United States. I will allow you to see how this went south more and more and more, and you will notice the people standing behind Trump motionless, as if they are thinking to themselves, maybe if I don't move, I'll blend into the wall and they won't notice that I'm here. This is like nothing I have seen before.
Respond to President Biden being diagnosed with cancer. Are you going to call your predecessor?
I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time.
To get to stage 9, that's a long time. Now, I'll tell you what this is about. The Gleason score for Biden's tumor is 9. That's a measure of the aggressiveness of the cancer cells. Now, of course, Trump is confusing stage 9 cancer with a Gleason 9 tumor. And you might say, well, it's at 9, it's an innocent mistake. But most people sort of generally in the world understand that when we talk about cancer and stages, we talk about 1, 2, 3, and 4. Trump with stage 9 is, of course, indicative of something we already knew. He doesn't have the ability to retain or synthesize information. He remembers the number 9, and at no point is there a checking mechanism that goes, wait a second, I might remember something about 9. It can't be stage 9 because there's no such thing. I know that. I know that because I have friends and I have family and I exist in the world, and I know there's no such thing as stage 9 cancer. That mental process is not happening. The correct synapses are not firing for Trump. And then he devolves directly, apropos of nothing, into bragging about his own cognitive tests. What?
I just had my physical. You saw that. You saw the results of that particular test. I think that test is standard to pretty much anybody getting a physical, good physical. Wow. We had the doctors at the White House and over at Walter Reed, which is a fantastic hospital. I do it. I did a very complete physical, including cognitive tests. I'm proud to announce I aced it. Got them all. I got them all right. You proud of me? Yes. Your husband would be proud of me for getting them all right. It's a little risk. If I didn't get them all right, these people would be after me. It would be not a good situation. But I think, frankly, anybody running for president should take a cognitive test.
Remember, the question is, will you be calling Joe Biden after learning of his cancer diagnosis? Trump goes, I'm shocked we didn't hear about stage 9 before. And then he starts bragging about a dementia test.
You say it's unconstitutional, but I would say in that particular case, having a cognitive test wouldn't be so bad. But when you take tests, medical, as a male, that test is very standard. I don't know if it's given to everybody, but it's given.
Now, Trump doesn't mention it because, of course, his brain is mush. I think he's saying getting a PSA test, it's a blood test, prostate-specific antigen, that it's standard. But, of course, what's standard is once you turn, in some places, 70 or 75, it's not done anymore. Now, should it be done? That's a discussion that can be had. There are some urologists floating around online who said, it's not standard, but it should be done. The reason not to, you might say, why wouldn't you do it? If the risk of prostate cancer goes up the older you get, why wouldn't you do it? And my understanding, speaking to a urologist, is you stop the PSA because since prostate cancer is typically considered slow growing, and if you've gotten to age 70 or 75 without it, it would typically, these are probabilistic outcomes, it would typically mean that if you get it, it would be the slow growing rather than the aggressive kind. You can have false positives of mildly elevated PSA just as a result of age, that if you kept testing in 70, 75, 80-year-olds, it would send you down a garden path of testing that's not necessary. This is just what is said, right? Now, we could have a conversation. Should you keep testing PSA or not? Trump can't even, because his brain is just such mush, he can't even string together what he really means here.
Just about. And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9.
And again, there's no such thing as stage 9 cancer.
I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him. Well, he said, if it's the same doctor, he said there was nothing wrong there. And that's being proven to be a sad situation. And the auto pen is becoming a very big deal. The auto pen is becoming a big deal because it's...
Now Trump is off into conspiracy world. The question, remember, a minute and a half ago was, will you be reaching out to Joe Biden over the cancer diagnosis? Trump is saying now that the auto pen is part of some way in which the 2020 election was rigged against him. Wow.
It was like that maybe was the president who ever operated the auto pen. But when they say that was not good, they also, you have to look and you have to say that the test was not so good either. In other words, there are things going on that the public wasn't informed. And I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor, if it's the same, or even if it's two separate doctors. Why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think the doctor said he's just fine, and it's turned out that's not so. It's very dangerous. Look, this is no longer politically correct. This is dangerous for our country. Look at the mess we're in. You're talking about all these questions on Ukraine and Russia that would have never happened. As an example, if I were president, would have never happened. The other thing.
All right. So now he goes into his standard, none of this would have ever happened if I were president. It's a big week, I know, for the Biden cover up here, but Donald Trump is more incoherent and more wrong than Biden ever was here. The only difference is Trump's energy is high when he's incoherent. And of course, Trump has no ability to correctly process and store information. And that is completely evident here, completely and totally evident here. By the way, one other little clip from this, the guy who constantly brags about how great he is cognitively, he can't open a box and someone has to help him during this same event. Look at this.
So, you want to help us out? You're the one to make it.
He hands the box to someone and this other guy just opens the box. So Trump's struggling with basic stuff, But listen, Trump believes we should have heard about the stage 9 cancer, which doesn't exist, a long time ago. Also yesterday, Donald Trump stunned his audience with mayo-brained delusions. And I challenge you to figure out what this guy is talking about. But meanwhile, the focus continues to be Joe Biden somehow. This guy's president now. This guy currently has access to the nuclear codes. Trump started talking about Los Angeles and sending them water, big water, beautiful water, in a statement that I can only describe as reflective of stunning levels of imbecility.
The mayor of Los Angeles is not looking too good with what the water. We just sent so much water down their way. They didn't want to take it because it was bad for the environment. I said, no, water's good for the environment. If they would have had it when I told them to get it, they wouldn't have had the fires, or it would have been very small.
This is sort of like the epitome of this simplistic thinking. How could water be bad? Water is simply good. Wow, that's interesting, Don. I never really thought about it that way. Water is good, therefore, just put water everywhere. Why even think about it? On the tariff stuff, we've finally had a few days where things are like a little bit calmer, where it seems maybe this guy is not going to, put the country off of a cliff. And all of a sudden, Trump gets on the mic yesterday in D.C. and starts saying, we are not necessarily tariffing the things we should be tariffing, and they're going to be going up. And he again talks about putting tariffs on pharmaceuticals. And again, after hours trading starts getting extraordinarily shaky because of
25 years, they were taking advantage of us. We never did anything. But now we're doing it to them, and fairly, I'll tell you what, modestly. But we'll be taking, and we are taking in right now, 25% in cars, 25% on steel and aluminum, 25% on other things, and that'll be going up to 50, 75.
Uh-oh.
Maybe 100 in some cases. We have to get our pharmaceutical industry back. Once we establish that in another couple of weeks, it'll start roaring back. It's already roaring back because they know we're doing it. And it's really been, you've done a great job, but...
So Trump again saying, pharmaceuticals, we got to get them back. Taxes, tariffs might have to go, import taxes, which is what a tariff is. We might have to put them up to 100%. Of course, anyone with even an iota of economic understanding knows that tariffs are not going to bring anything back. We still have a federal minimum wage in the $7 range in the United States. We've got a housing crisis and lack of access to healthcare. And Trump thinks tariffs on foreign goods are going to solve our problems. It's wild. Trump also suggesting, I guess, that Robert Kraft created the New England Patriots. Created.
This won't be the fun I thought, but it is fun. I like to create. You like to create. Most of the people in the room like to create, just like Bob Kraft created the New England Patriots. He happens to be here.
Robert Kraft actually bought the New England Patriots close to 40 years after their creation. He didn't create them. It's just, do facts matter? I don't know. And then unable to get away from maybe the most triggering and titillating topic to the failed current president. He says 2020 was rigged. He's still going at it.
Also won. And I said, that's good. And then when it came time to do this, after the election was rigged, the second one was rigged, whether you like it or not, it was rigged like nobody's ever seen. And now people are seeing it. Now people don't even fight me. They used to say, sure, it's not really that nice to say. I'm an honest, it was rigged. And unfortunately, that's what happened. You look at some of the...
That's right. It was rigged by the cats. It was rigged by the dogs. And if you thought Trump was incoherent and orange during this indoor event, just wait till you see what he did outside the White House. Yesterday, the Take It Down Act was signed by Donald Trump. This is a bill that focuses on what is colloquially known as revenge porn. And Trump rambling about deepfakes, looking as orange as ever in another clown show.
It's known as deepfakes. We've all heard about deepfakes. I have them all the time, but nobody does anything. I asked Pam, can you help me, Pam? She says, no, I'm too busy doing other things. Don't worry, you'll survive. But a lot of people don't survive.
That's right. Deepfakes is something Trump knows more about even than the pornographers, he would tell you.
Trump on the Take It Down Act, he says this was tough to do. You know, there's all these amendments. You never know what's going to happen with these. Take your pick.
Seen before. It's getting worse and worse, and I think this is going to hopefully stop it. And not easy to do. People talked about all sorts of First Amendment, Second Amendment. They talked about any amendment they could make up, and we got it through.
We were able to get it through regardless of amendments people were making up. It was crazy. Trump casually mentioning he's got to keep this event short because he has to get back to Putin, which it's such a nothing throwaway comment. But also, he has to go and get back to Putin. He can't be here with his crowd in the United States because Putin's waiting for him, I guess.
This is big stuff. I'm in trouble because I don't have your names. They didn't give me these names. We have so many. We have half of the Senate here. Now they're all going to hate me because I can't introduce you. We don't have the time for that. I have to get back to Putin and people.
He's got to go get back to Putin and people, as you can see who is in charge there. And then finally, and this is one of those things where it's like, is Trump lying or is it true? And we've got to investigate it. Trump says he got $5 trillion from Middle Eastern countries during this recent trip, which sounds weird.
Because there's no place like the White House, I found out. You know, you have a lot of places, and I just left some of the richest places, and we loved them, and they gave us a nice contribution of about $5 trillion, but this is a special place. Even they talk about it, so it's great to have everybody.
The American economy is about a $30 trillion economy, and Trump casually says he got $5 trillion from Middle Eastern nations during this recent trip. We just don't know. As orange as ever, as dishonest as ever, and as unfit as ever. Later in the show, we'll talk about the fallout that is now having, even within the Republican Party. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. It costs nothing, and we are pushing to 4 million subscribers, a number nobody could even believe. Make sure you are subscribed. We'll take a quick break and be back right after this. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. It's great to welcome back to the program today J.L. Collins, financial author and investor. A revised and expanded edition of his book, The Simple Path to Wealth, is out now. A book that one of my favorite personal finance books, and it's on the list on my website. JL, it's so good to have you back on.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be back here with you, David. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So listen, I mean, I think one of the interesting things about the timing of this conversation is if we think about the last few months and the alleged Liberation Day event of April 2nd, the announcement of, and then pause of, and then reminder that they're still on of these various blanket tariffs. The
Right.
point of it all is whatever was announced, whatever was done, whatever was taken back, it created in the stock market some ups and downs, and for a period of time, they were pretty significant downs. The many of your expected commentators were saying it could take 10 years to get back to the stock market level where we were just months ago. Of
Right.
course, we're back there now, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
I think to kind of open the conversation, as the average person is looking at what could be political and or economic instability and thinking, what do I need to do right now in the market financially? Is the answer once again proven to be figure out your asset allocation and stick with it?
That is the answer. And even the shorter version to what should I do now is nothing. You stay the course, which is always the answer, right? So if you go back 4-6 weeks when we were in the middle of this downturn triggered by the tariffs, nobody certainly, well, not me, would have predicted that we'd be back in positive territory already. But the corollary of that is nobody knows where we go from here.
Right.
right? I mean, it could be that we're back on the way up on a growth trajectory. It could be this is a brief pause before we hit something much more serious. For the record, I'm not a fan of the tariffs. I think they're a terrible and dangerous idea. But one of the things that I've learned is my opinion doesn't matter to Mr. Market at all, and it will do whatever it is going to do. 6 weeks ago, my social media and blog were lighting up with predictions of doom. And what I say all the time, the same thing I said COVID is there's always something scary when the market plunges. That's why it plunges, but it never lasts. Eventually it turns around and continues its growth. I don't know if we're at that turnaround part now, as I said earlier, but that's always the trajectory. And if you look at COVID, it's even a better example because it's in the rearview mirror and clear. COVID killed about 1 million people, which is tragic. But in a population of 330 million, it's a tiny fraction. So it's not a major disruption. Had COVID been the Black Death, which killed 50-60% of the population back in the Middle Ages, that's a civilization-ending event. I mean, but then it doesn't matter where your money's invested.
Right. Having a little gold is not going to make a huge difference if that's the scenario.
Not going to make any difference at all.
Yeah.
Having guns and ammunition might.
Right. I have friends who I consider very smart and have sold businesses, do high-level legal work, high-level finance. And over the last couple of weeks, they look at me and they say with total conviction, this is a dead cat bounce. We're going to see a 30% drop in the market. They are as convinced as they are about the sun coming up tomorrow. Or I have other friends who say, we got through it. It's up and away from here. Trump's not really going to put the tariffs back on. It's smooth sailing. And to all of them, I say, how do you know that? I have no idea which of those two scenarios is more likely. And I'm building my outlook over the fact that I don't know. If you don't know, what would it make sense to do is kind of my approach. Are you surprised by sometimes people who clearly are intelligent, thoughtful people who seem convinced that they know it makes sense to get in or get out at any particular point in time? I have no idea about it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. In fact, at one point in my life, I was probably one of them.
Me too.
It seems so tempting to think So if we reel back to 2016, when Trump first won the election, whether you love Trump or you loathe him, one of the things that was common wisdom, and I think accurately, is he is a disruptive force. And I, in 2016, sat back and I thought, one of the things I know about the market is it hates disruptive forces.
Right.
It hates uncertainty. Maybe I should go to cash, which was completely against my discipline. And fortunately, I didn't, because I stuck to my discipline, because I recognized, while it seemed so absolutely clear to me what was going to happen, I don't really know that. That's just my opinion. The market doesn't care about my opinion or yours, doesn't care about the opinion of the people who think it's going down 30%, doesn't care about the opinion of the people who think it's going up from here nonstop, or it may just plateau for a while. Market doesn't care. And when you start thinking what the market's going to do, you've fallen prey to hubris. Nobody can predict it. So you stay the course, knowing that the market will recover. Whatever.
What do you say about someone who doesn't take an extreme perspective, like I'm selling it all and going to cash, or on the other side, I'm putting in every dollar I can find into the market because I expect it to go up? But for example, I was listening to Scott Galloway recently, who his approach was, I think I'm paraphrasing, over the next 10 to 15 years, US stocks, I believe, are going to be flat. So I'm still dollar cost averaging. I've still got my asset allocations that I'm thinking of that are appropriate for my situation. But I'm moving into, I think he said, Asian and some other continental markets. It's a shift maybe in the focus, but more or less sticking to the plan. On the one hand, there's some appeal to that intuitively. On the other hand, I ask myself, why didn't I already have those in my asset allocation if they were such a good idea? Am I being swayed by news and the politics of the day? What do you say to an idea like that? Just shift into Asian markets as an example.
Yeah. So again, you think you know what's going to happen in the future, and you don't. It could be that Scott's right. That's exactly what will happen. But I remember a decade ago, David, uh, all the smart people in the market were saying, the market has had such a great 10-year run or whatever, however long it's been.
Yeah.
Just can't expect these returns going forward. You should get used for the next decade, which of course now we've lived through, of maybe 4% returns in the market. Well, the market's had a stunning decade. I mean, a stunning decade of growth. So they were all wrong. Now, I stayed invested because that's my discipline, not because I knew the market was going to have a stunning decade, but because I knew I didn't know, right? So I have no idea what the market's going to do in the next 15 years. For instance, the first part of this year, European stocks have absolutely trounced the US market.
Right.
That hasn't happened in 10, 15 years. Now, is that the new trend? Because there have been historically times when international has outperformed US. Hasn't been true for the last 10, 15 years. Maybe that's the next 10, 15 years as Scott thinks. But I don't know that. What I do know is that the US accounts for 60% of all publicly traded companies in the world. When I invest in VTSAX, which is a total stock market index fund, the large majority of those companies that make up that fund are international by definition. And so assuming the rest of the world, like Asia and Europe and Africa, continue to grow and prosper, their markets will do well, but so will my VTSAX benefit through that. So I don't feel the need for international. By the way, that puts me very much out of step with the vast majority of people talking about this stuff
Yeah.
and writing about it. And so if somebody said to me, hey, JL, I take your point, kind of makes sense, but I'd feel more comfortable with some international, I'd say, God bless you, go for it. Buy a world fund, a low cost world fund from somebody like Vanguard and call it a day. In fact, that's what I tell my international readers, because the US is the only country that is dominant enough in the markets that you can get away with that home country bias. So if I were anywhere else in the world, I'd already be in a world fund.
I want to ask you a little bit about some of the more speculative assets where the natural one to talk about is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies more broadly. We talked about it a little bit the last time you were on, but now we've seen, even presidents get involved in meme coins. And it's really, we're seeing certain things that I don't know that I would have ever predicted 5 years ago.
Right.
My view to my audience has been, and this has been my view for 12 years or something, I have absolutely no idea what the future of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin specifically is. Once it was around long enough that I said, this might be something, I decided 2.5% of my assets felt like a nice balance where if I lose all of it, I'm okay, but I've got some upside exposure. I don't know. I had zero predictive power as to where it was going to be. As it went up, I would sell down to my 2.5%. When it went down, I would top up to 2.5%. And I just wait. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Where are you now with, maybe for some people it's 2, maybe it's 4%, some portion of their assets in something that is known to be speculative? What's your guidance on something like that?
So first of all, let me address that whole concept of taking a small portion of your portfolio and playing with it, so to speak, because it's a question I get all the time. Is it okay if I take 2, 5, 10% and play? Sure, it's okay. But understand that if you are correct, it's really not going to be enough to move the needle, because by definition, you want to put in not so much that won't move the needle if you're incorrect. So that's one of the reasons that I don't bother. But talking specifically about crypto as an example, and Bitcoin, my take on it is real simple. It's way too volatile to actually serve as a currency, right? Currencies need stability in order to function as a means of trade. That's why inflation, and for that matter, deflation, are so terribly damaging, is because suddenly the currency isn't reliable. It's either worth less and less as you go forward in inflation or more and more in deflation. And that makes it unsuitable for a means of trade. So crypto is not at that stage yet. Maybe it'll get there someday. So what it really is not an investment in my view, but a speculation.
Yes.
So what do I mean by that? Well, an investment in VTSAX is in companies that are actively operating to sell products and services, to grow their businesses, and hopefully, if they're doing it effectively, to make a profit that we as owners benefit from. A speculation like crypto or gold for that matter, or classic cars or art, is where you're buying something and you're anticipating and hoping that at some point in the future, somebody will pay you more for it than you paid for it, right? That's a speculation. There's no underlying dynamic creating value there other than what the world around you continues to perceive as value. Now, to be clear, if you'd invested in crypto 10, 15 years ago, and held through the very wild and rocky ride it's been, it would have served you extraordinarily well. But that's the nature of a speculation. You don't know. Were lots of other speculative investments you could have made 10, 15 years ago that crashed and burned. So the question, if you're looking at crypto or Bitcoin in particular now, is not that 10, 15 year run. It's where does it now? It's $100,000 a coin or something. Where does it go from here? And again, to your point, nobody really knows. So your 2.5% investment may do well, it may not, but it's not going to move the needle in your portfolio all that much, probably anyway.
All right. The Simple Path to Wealth in its new expanded edition is now available. We've been speaking with the book's author, J.L. Collins. J.L., always great to talk to you. Really appreciate it.
It's always my pleasure. Anytime, my friend.
If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. The White House press secretary for the Trump administration is Karoline Leavitt. We've heard from her before, and one of the new things that's going on is she is occasionally holding MAGA influencer briefings completely separate from the primary press briefings. But sometimes they will allow a new media correspondent into the big boy and big girl press briefing room. This time, it was a guy from the conspiracy site Zero Hedge named Liam Cosgrove, who, by the way, has invited me to stuff he's organized before. David, it's Liam. Do you want to debate this person? Do you want to debate that person? Of course, I've politely declined those invitations. We learn here, as Karoline Leavitt smirks about a completely bonkers Clinton body count conspiracy theory related to Jeffrey Epstein and a whole bunch of other stuff. Karoline Leavitt smirks as this conspiracy theorist asks the question. Leavitt's job is entertainment. It's not news. She's extraordinarily focused here, not only on the sort of visual presentation she provides, but on entertainment. And it is a humiliation that this is now part of a press briefing. Listen, I've heard conspiracy theories before. This is something else.
So over the weekend, President Trump posted to Truth Social a video highlighting what most people call the Clinton body count, which is the strange
and look at that smirk
number of suicides that seem to happen in Clinton circles. I have a headline here from the Washington Post that said, Trump peddles false conspiracy theories tying the Clintons to several deaths. So I just wanted to highlight real quick, this wasn't in Trump's video, but this is from the Arkansas Times. And it's the death of Mark Middleton, who was a former Clinton White House aide, who was found dead on a Clinton Foundation property. And I'll just quote from the Arkansas Times. Middleton apparently shot himself in the chest with a shotgun and also hung himself from a tree with an extension cord. So I have no idea how somebody commits suicide that way, but if the Washington Post is here, maybe you can enlighten us as to how that was actually a suicide. So anyways, that's just a lead into my question about the most famous Clinton-related suicide, which is that of Jeffrey Epstein. There's still a lot of questions around that case. you've released phase 1 of the Epstein files. What was missing from that is any connection to his ties to intelligence agencies, and that's really the whole story, that not just trafficking young girls, but doing it on behalf of intelligence agencies, and even potentially as part of a blackmail ring with potential ties to the Israeli government. So,
did you guys even catch that? The real story of the Epstein case is that he was trafficking young girls, but it was because intelligence agencies were having him do it. And it might also involve the Israeli government. That is a doozy. And also the Clintons killed a lot of people.
For phase 2, when can we expect it? Will it have information pertaining to those aspects of the Epstein case?
I know the Attorney General has committed to releasing those files. I would defer you to the Department of Justice on her timeline, but when she has made a promise in the past, she has kept it, and I'm certain that she will in this case as well.
Oh, this is part of an official press briefing right now. What a debasement of this. What is happening in this country? Caroline Leavitt was asked, Is Trump okay adding to the deficit with this tax bill? Every serious economist and scoring agency has looked at it and said, this is going to blow up the deficit like Trump always does. And Leavitt just goes, it's not going to add to the deficit.
Just a quick follow-up. Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And
now remember, she's playing a game here. A bill can save 1.6 trillion in one bucket and then cost 3 trillion in another bucket. So you've got to subtract it and you say, okay, well, it still adds 1.4 trillion to the deficit, right? I could say to you, hey, I found some savings. We're no longer getting those sumo oranges. God, those are delicious. We're out of season now. I went the other day. I looked everywhere. I couldn't fit. They're done. Okay, let's go back. I found savings. No more sumo oranges. So we're saving. Right. But if you replace that spending with twice as much on the golden kiwis, which I highly recommend, you found savings, but you found more spending. And every serious analysis finds that this Trump tax bill, if passed in its latest iteration, would significantly increase the debt. Caroline Leavitt says that everybody who calls the plane being gifted to Trump a personal gift is wrong, even though, of course, after Trump leaves office, it goes to Trump's presidential library. But she's big mad because people need to correct their stories.
Very clear. The government of Qatar, the Qatari family, has offered to donate this plane to the United States Air Force, where that donation will be accepted according to all legal and ethical obligations. It will be retrofitted to the highest of standards by the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force. This plane is not a personal donation or a gift to the President of the United States. And everyone who wrote that last week should go and correct their stories, because this is a donation to our country and to the United States Air Force. As for a timeline, because it is the United States Air Force that is accepting the plane, I would defer you to them for specifics, because the president, frankly, has nothing to do with it. It's the Air Force's project.
Yeah. Of course, not denying that the plane goes to Trump's Library Foundation after he leaves office. Yesterday, we discussed Trump's thinly veiled threat at Walmart, where he said, Walmart, you'd better eat the tariffs. Don't raise your prices because of the tariffs. I'm going to be watching you. A very clear threat. Caroline Leavitt asked, what did you mean? What did Trump mean by that? Here's what she said.
The president is committed to ensuring that prices remain low for American consumers, and he maintains the position that foreign countries will absorb these tariffs.
What does he mean by I'll be watching Walmart?
He'll be watching, seeing what they're doing. Jennifer.
That's all. He's just going to watch, like a case study. That's all. Next question is about Trump's physical health. Caroline Leavitt says he's just so healthy.
Follow up on former President Biden. White House doctors may have missed the early stages of his prostate cancer. So is President Trump worried about the quality of care that presidents get here?
Not as far as President Trump is concerned. The White House physician we have here is phenomenal, and the team of physicians that take care of the president, particularly at Walter Reed Medical Center, are great. The president had his physical recently, as you know. He had perfect results. He's in very good shape. I think
perfect.
Those of you who traveled to the Middle East with us last week can attest to the president's endurance. And by the way, I will add, we returned home from a very long and tiring trip last week. And on Saturday, where was the president? In the Oval Office working all day. He doesn't stop. He doesn't quit. He's in great health, and he trusts his physicians.
Healthiest president ever. And then finally, Trump also recently taking out his anger on Taylor Swift, saying Taylor Swift is no longer hot. What did Trump mean by that?
The last one, what does President Trump mean when he says that Taylor Swift is no longer hot?
Look, he is speaking about Taylor Swift's political views and how perhaps it has impacted the support of the American public for her work, and I will leave it at that.
There you go. It has nothing to do with whether Trump is attracted to Taylor Swift. Peter Doocy, get your mind out of the gutter. Another failed and completely humiliating press briefing. These are now of zero value in communicating anything of substance to the American people. Vice President J.D. Vance wasted no time in showing us exactly who he is, responding to Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis, not stage 9, stage 4, with a Gleason 9 prostate tumor. J.D. Vance had the following to say. This stuff is sickening.
Look, I mean, first of all, of course, we wish the best for the former president's health. And, it sounds pretty serious, but hopefully he makes the right recovery. Look, I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. Look, I mean...
We just learned that Joe Biden has stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer. And the vice president of the United States decides it's the perfect moment to question his competence and to kickstart this political autopsy. There's no decency, just a thinly veiled attack that he dresses up as concern. I'm just concerned. Biden is not in office. He's a private citizen, and he has a life-threatening illness. There really is an urgency now to assess his fitness for a job he doesn't hold, and for which he ultimately realized he shouldn't be a candidate for. Now, should Biden have even started running for re-election? No. Was it a mistake to even attempt? Yeah, it was. It was. But the only urgency here is that J.D. Vance wants to sneak in this politically opportune moment, and it's just disgusting. But this is who J.D. Vance is. He's a guy who built his brand on feigned humility, and he turned it into a career of parroting Donald Trump's worst instincts, and it just doesn't stop there. Here's another clip that, if we're going to have a category called bootlicking diplomacy, here is J.D. Vance blaming Vladimir Putin. Excusing Vladimir Putin, saying Putin's in a tough spot now. Putin started the war. Listen to this.
Talks have been proceeding for a little while. We realize there's a bit of an impasse here, and I think the president's going to say to President Putin, look, are you serious? Are you real about this? I think, honestly, that President Putin, he doesn't quite know how to get out of the war. This is a little bit of guess, but I think the president would
Poor guy, huh?
agree that part of this is I'm not sure that Vladimir Putin has a strategy himself for how to unwind the war, of course, that's been going on for a few years now. There's fundamental mistrust between Russia and the West. It's one of the things the president thinks is frankly stupid, that we should be able to move beyond the mistakes that have been made in the past, but that takes two to tango. I know the president's willing to do that, but if Russia's not willing to do that, then we're eventually just going to have to say, this is not our war.
This is so weird. You know, Putin started the war. He invaded Ukraine. It's not like a sitcom plot. He wandered into it by accident. Now he has to find some zany way out. There's a really easy way to get out of the war. Pull your troops out of a sovereign nation that you're invading. Stop bombing and stop doing all the things that you're doing. That's it. But instead of condemning the architect of one of the worst invasions in modern history, Vance is kind of like, you know, Putin's in a really tough spot at this point. He's in imagine if someone said, Hitler doesn't know how to stop the war. It's such a tough spot that he's in. This is such cowardice, and it's really appeasement dressed up as realism. Listen, I'm just being real with you guys. It's a tough spot. And this tells you everything about how this second Trump term is planning to handle global authoritarianism. They're going to apologize for it. They're going to give excuses. They're going to defer to it. J.D. Vance kind of wants to brand himself as the populist outsider with common sense. Putin's in a tough spot, but he's not. JD's not a serious thinker. He's certainly not a moral leader. And he's not even a particularly clever troll. He's a guy who watched Trump weaponize cruelty. And now as his number one deputy, as the vice president of the United States, he's realized that weaponizing cruelty is, I guess, the path to power. So that's where JD is. And it's really pathetic. We've got a fantastic bonus show for you today. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are facing the wrath of MAGA because they are saying Jeffrey Epstein genuinely took his own life. There's no conspiracy. He just did it. And MAGA is furious with them. Secondly, a New Jersey representative has been charged with assaulting ICE agents during a clash at a Newark facility. And finally, Ashley Babbitt's family is going to receive $5 million from the Trump administration. She was the individual killed for her actions on January 6th, 2021, the riots. Why is her family getting $5 million? All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Sign up at joinpacman.com. I'll see you then. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors.
There are only two things that matter with a VPN. Does the VPN use open source software that users can verify is not logging their internet activity? Have police gotten a court order to get user activity logs from that VPN, only to find out that the logs never existed because of the company's transparent no-log policy? The only VPN who can answer yes to both of those questions is Private Internet Access, the only VPN who can prove that your data stays private. They're giving you 83% off, which is just $203 a month, plus 4 extra months for free at piavpn.com/DavidP.